Notwithstanding the grimness of war, our men had an innate ability to make the best of every day. Their ability to remain in good spirits against the odds is expressed in many tales of their war years when, surrounded by the bleakness, they found activities to entertain themselves in the most positive of ways. Not all their activities were endorsed by the officers, nor received the tick of approval from the corporals, and on occasions led to many consequences. But mud, rain, mozzies, homesick boys, sick ones, bad tempers, no mail. In fact, the boys never received a letter in New Guinea. These boys took these challenges as part of their daily life. However, as the true men they were, they always took it on the chin. It's these stories today that they share with us. Today we share the story of our unit in the hope this story will deepen our understanding of the crucial role our soldiers played in the Pacific in World War II. We are Australia's oldest field ambulance. From our unit size of 180 members, we now have 10 surviving. Today I honour the presence of Bob Greenslade, Laurie Grimmett, Ross Runting, Wes Seddon. Those unable to be here today are Alan Harkinsey, Bob Wadsworth, Kevin Thomas, Merv Roach, Albie Bolt and Harley Thiel. Indeed, I honour them. Thank you. The history of the 2nd Field Ambulance dates back to World War I, where the unit was formed in Victoria in August 1914 as part of the 1st Division. It departed Australia aboard HMAS Wilshire for service in Egypt, Gallipoli, Sinai and Palestine. In World War II, the 2nd Field Ambulance, formerly a militia unit, was again reformed near Geraldton in Western Australia to become the 2nd Australian Field Ambulance, AIF, seeking service in Western Australia, Darwin, New Britain, Jacquinot Bay, Toll Plantation, Rabaul, Torrekin and Faroe Island. Vietnam. The 2nd Field Ambulance was a medical unit based at Woodside in South Australia and was the only regular field ambulance that the Army had at the time. It was resited at Puckapunyal, Victoria, and after increasing its strength with intakes from the 1st and 2nd National Servicemen, embarked for Vietnam in April 1966. I'd like to acknowledge the initiative of the originals of the 2nd Field Ambulance that have united all 3 2nd Field Ambulance services in the 3 major wars, and on Anzac Day we have representatives that join us from the 2nd Field Ambulance in Vietnam. So it was in 1941 the 2nd Field Ambulance had assembled as a Melbourne-based unit. They were sent to Mount Martha and dispersed across the Mornington Peninsula. 90% of the boys that joined at Mount Martha were 18 or 19 years old. On the 12th of April 1942, the 2nd Field Ambulance, part of the 4th Division, left for Melbourne bound for Fremantle on the troop ship the City of Paris and the City of London, arriving in Fremantle on the 19th of April. It was indeed an uncomfortable journey, with ongoing large swells causing all sorts of seasickness. On arrival, the unit was transported to the Melville staging camp, to Black Boy and then to Chidlow Wells, then to Moora and to New Maracaro, about 30 kilometres east of Geraldton. In 1942 and 43, the coast of Australia was of great concern to the Australian government and the armed forces, as the Japanese were not far away and had already bombed Darwin. From New Maracaro, the unit was moved to Gingin and the Collie Jungle Training School. The only complaint was the beer was warm. But boy, was the water cold when the boys were waist deep walking through the scrub, firing blanks at moving targets through the trees. Then they returned to Melbourne for short leave before departing to Tarawa Transit Station in South Australia, then on the Ghan to Alice Springs. The unit was transferred from there with their equipment onto semi-trailer trucks for the long haul to the Larrimah railway siding in the Northern Territory. At Larrimah, the unit transferred themselves onto the train, which were open cattle trucks, and arrived at Adelaide River covered in smoke and black soot. Adelaide River was the 61-mile peg from Darwin and was to be the campsite just off the main highway from Darwin. It was here, the boys recall, a transport vehicle bogged to the axle just beyond the camp. They sent help with other vehicles to assist, and the end result was all 8 vehicles were bogged. As dairy farmers' sons from the Western District, Jack Ryan, Watto, Sheppy, Peter and Adi McKenna and others thought the army was okay. They lie in bed till 6:30, and that was an extra 2 hours for them as there were no cows to milk. Eventually orders came from the unit to return to Melbourne for a few days' leave, then by train to Brisbane to the Strathpine Transit Camp for intensive training. From there it was on to Cairns to await orders to board the troop ship Van Hertz. Historically, New Britain was formerly a German possession, and Rabaul was the scene of the first fighting by Australian troops in the 1914-18 war, when they seized the German wireless station on the site of which now stands the War Cemetery. In October 1941, Colonel Scanlon was appointed the commander of New Guinea, of the New Guinea area, which included the territory of New Guinea, New Britain, Manus Island, New Ireland and Bougainville. With troops totalling around 1,400, their task was to defend Rabaul and the slow progress of the Japanese unit, while a larger AIF force could arrive from New Guinea or Australia. The intention had been for the US Navy to arrive by April 1942 and turn Rabaul into a US naval base. When the Japanese planes did attack, it was too rapid for the plans to be put into operation. And while the Japanese were attacking the Simpson Harbour, a Japanese task force was moving undetected towards New Britain. After 3 weeks of air bombardment, Rabaul was attacked by the Japanese from the sea and against overwhelming odds soon broke the defence. It's estimated against the original garrison of 1,400, the Japanese landed 17,000 men in the immediate vicinity of Rabaul. Though forced to withdraw, the garrison left between 3,000 to 4,000 Japanese dead on the shores of the bay and the harbour. In the air, Japan enjoyed a crushing superiority in the early months of 1942, and it was Lae and its neighbouring airfields that were the objects of the first Japanese attack on New Guinea. On the morning of the 4th of February at Toll Plantation, the prisoners were assembled and marched to Toll Plantation House. Here they were stripped of all personal articles. The hands of the individual prisoners were tied behind their backs with cord and then roped together in groups of 9 and 10. And in small groups they were marched off in various directions through the plantation, where they were bayoneted, cut down or shot. It was the men of the 2nd Field Ambulance who discovered these shallow graves at Toll Plantation on their arrival in 1945. With the events unfolding in the Philippines, General MacArthur informed General Blaney that he was going to have to use all US forces at his disposal, and therefore New Britain would once again come under the command of the AIF. So, on the 21st of November in 1944, the 2nd Australian Field Ambulance was on the high seas on their way to New Britain, arriving at Jackanot Bay on the 25th of November, where they set up camp on the banks of the fast-flowing Woonung River. The unit spent their first Christmas Day away from home here. Everyone was involved in various ways, setting up camp, clearing the scrub, cutting down thin saplings to make frames for hospital wards, kitchen and mess huts, and frames for troops' tents. A and B Company went out to advance areas behind the brigades to bring in the wounded or sick at any time. Trips inland were not so dandy for us troops, says Laurie. With the departure of the 6th Field Ambulance from Jackanow Bay, the medical arrangements of the area were left in the hands of the 2nd Field Ambulance, who were now in charge of the 5th Division Rest Camp, and within 1 month were caring for 60 men, whilst the MDS were holding 40 patients. With the arrival of the medical service, as well as the establishment of the 7th 8th Australian General Hospital, it relieved some pressure for the 2nd Field Ambulance. Now, with strong medical support on New Britain, the final assault on the Japanese could proceed as normal. By the end of March, the action was complete and the battalions moved into the Waterworth plantation, where they set up a beach evacuation station. With the arrival of the 4th Field Ambulance at Jackanow Bay, the 2nd Field Ambulance was sent to the Toll plantation along with a detachment from the 105th CCS, which was of great assistance, as the 16th Battalion was ambushed with 11 casualties urgently requiring medical attention. A ceasefire was ordered on the 15th of August 1945. However, the 2nd Field Ambulance remained at Wide Bay, their wards full with wounded military and civilians suffering with various tropical diseases. Although it was not all work, there was now time to carry on with things that the unit loved doing, particularly playing sport. They loved playing football and had some talented players. The Japanese surrendered on the 6th of September and peace was brought to New Britain, with HMS Glory's Corsair aircraft performing a victory roll overhead. The 2nd Field Ambulance were to be the first of the medical units to arrive in Rabaul, sailing on board the Manoora, arriving in Simpson Harbour on the 10th of September. They wasted no time setting up wards in other departments such as a pharmacy and operating theatre. Then they began the task of examining and assessing the many prisoners of war, along with hundreds of locals, as well as those who had been used as forced labour by the Japanese, many of whom were suffering from the effects of malaria and malnutrition, all showing signs of ill treatment of their time spent in the hands of the Japanese. The ambulance also had to visit the now liberated prisoner of war camp, where it witnessed firsthand the conditions that these now free POWs had to endure. The unit spent many a long hour caring for their patients, either at the camps or with the more serious cases back at the lines. Now, it's well known Australians like to bet on just about anything, from horse racing to two flies crawling up a wall. Well, even in wartime, a man likes a bet. And so a betting shop was established at the rear of the unit and conducted in a professional manner by the late Val Bingo Wright, much to the delight of those in the unit who liked a small wager. Val was also an actor of some note. He appeared in the film Farlap. As a bookie by trade, he appears in most of the bookie scenes. His famous line was, "All bets are off" on Farlap. He also taught the other actors how to play being a bookie. His wife Josie and daughters are here and grandchildren are here today, and she tells a tale from Val. Val was part of a stretcher party searching for a couple of wounded Australians. It was getting dark, they didn't know where the Japanese were, they were in thick jungle, and they came across two Indigenous locals and asked them where the Japs were. The two locals pointed to a ridge not 200 yards away. They also inquired if they knew where the injured Australian soldiers were, or had they seen any injured Aussies. The locals took them to the Australians. The horticulturally inclined members of the unit set up a veggie garden and grew just about anything. But unfortunately for the unit, they had to leave just as it was really coming into fruition. When the 6th Battalion moved into their veggie garden, they harvested over 31 cases of fresh, luscious tomatoes. Entertainment for not only the members of the unit but also the patients in the wards was supplied by the old regulars at the unit that had been entertaining the 2nd Field Ambulance since the early days at Mount Martha. The Royal Papuan Constabulary Brass Band was also entertaining patients. With film stars like Sid Connor and Val Wright, they were sure to keep the audiences entertained and amused, creating a wonderful distraction for their environment. But gradually the unit personnel were sent home, while others went to Faroe Island on the southeastern tip of Bougainville. Captain Tom Arnold took the boys to Faroe Island, which included the medical staff and transport boys, where they were involved in the closure of the 2nd Field Ambulance, packing up all its surgical instruments and equipment and loading them onto the boat. Finally, the last of our men came home in April 1946. So in summary, during their time at New Britain, the 2nd Field Ambulance pioneered Jackanow Bay. They spent 5 months inside the perimeter at Toll Plantation and played their part in the occupation of Rabaul, helping keep 100,000 Japanese in check. In all, the 2nd Field Ambulance cared for over 2,500 patients, with many being seriously wounded as well as recovering prisoners of war. I wish to acknowledge Ian Seddon, son of Wes, who's with us today, who has recorded the unit history. He is an amateur historian and has done an exceptional job compiling our unit's history for the generations to come. I farewell you today with a quick poem from our former president, former long-standing president, Ted Galway, and it was from the President's report on Anzac Day 1994. And so to all who ask us why we keep these special days like Anzac Day, why? We're thinking of our mates. And when I've left the driver's seat and handed in me plates, I'll tell old Peter at the door, I've come to join me mates. Take care out there. Ted Galway, President, 1972 to 2014. Thank you.